The charges against Stanford will be unsealed today when he appears in court in Virginia. Stanford was taken into custody by the FBI late last night at his girlfriend's apartment in Fredericksburg, Virginia, after a Houston grand jury indicted him on fraud charges Thursday. Stanford is accused of running what used to be called a Ponzi scheme, but is now better characterized as a Madoff scheme. $8 billion disappeared, according to earlier government allegations.
The troubles keep piling on for Allen Stanford. He is back in jail after being treated for an aneurysm, and he is in jail because he allegedly ripped off investors to the tune of $7 billion. His fortune appears to be gone, and now the accused swindler is being accused of trying to rip off a casino. Bloomberg's Gigi Stone has more. What's the latest?
How shocking is it to fool 25,000 individuals by making them believe that you're running a legitimate business? And how foolish were the authorities who knew that he was running an illegal business for a decade? This is the story of Allen Stanford, who was caught in a financial fraud of more than $5 billion. But who was Allen, and how did he manage to make a fool out of these individuals? Let's get right to it. Allen was born in 1950 in the small town of Mexia, Texas, into a middle-class family. His father, James Stanford, owned an insurance brokerage and was active in local politics, serving as a city council member for 15 years and as Mexico's mayor for 2 terms. Allen began his career as a salesman and bookkeeper, striving to make the best of his life. Gradually, his life started to improve. With his background in sales and business, he transitioned into a successful investment manager, amassing billions of dollars in assets from both private investors and prominent figures in the political and sporting arenas. This was when Allen saw his chance. He decided to scam people and move their money where only he knew. In the mid-1980s, Allen left Texas for Montserrat, an island in the British West Indies, to break into the profitable offshore banking industry. This move lined up perfectly with the UK government's push for its territories to develop their own financial sectors, reducing their dependence on London. For Allen, this new industry was a great opportunity. These places became safe spots where the world's richest could hide their money from taxes. So places like Guernsey, Jersey, and the Isle of Man, along with Caribbean spots like Anguilla, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, and Montserrat became known as spots for offshore banking. The journey of Allen's scamming people started from there. He started to set up a Guardian International Bank on Montserrat in 1985, attracting many of the overseas investors he worked with during his Houston real estate days. But Stanford soon found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. The UK government began to crack down on suspicious offshore banking activities in its overseas territories during the latter part of the 1980s, and Stanford became severely uncomfortable at having to answer this new posed question.
Stanford International Bank from day one was a facade. It didn't exist. It was a Hollywood set. They weren't investing the money, like Stanford told investors.
And instead of going back to Texas, Allen Stanford set his sights on Antigua and Barbuda, a small Caribbean nation that had gained independence from the UK in 1981. Away from the watchful eyes of London's regulators, Stanford found a welcoming environment in the Antiguan government, which helped him quickly build his financial empire. Now, how did he manage to scam people through his newly founded bank? Well, here's the deal. Allen set up the Guardian International Bank in Montserrat in 1985, and by 1994 he renamed it Stanford International Bank. This bank became a magnet for international investors looking to park their money. He promised these investors sky-high returns, luring them in with the appeal of low taxes as the location was offshore. The more investors he attracted, the more money he had flowing into his bank. But here's the kicker. He wasn't just after the everyday folks wanting to open a certificate of deposits with a few $1,000s. He set his sights on wealthy global investors looking to hide their money from tax collectors. The allure of certificate of deposits, known for their safety and stability, made Stanford International Bank even more appealing than the stock market for many of these investors.
He became the largest private employer on the island, and Antigua became, in some ways, a center for offshore banking. Of course, it also became the heart of Allen Stanford's empire.
Nearly a decade, Allen was raking in the big bucks and living the high life. Imagine this, he even built a cricket stadium in Antigua in 2008. He pulled off a jaw-dropping stunt by organizing a $20 million cricket series between the English national team and a Caribbean team he called the Stanford Superstars for $20 million. That same year, he struck a deal with the England and Wales Cricket Board for a multi-million-dollar series of matches branded with his company's name. Allen didn't just stop at cricket. He dove into the media world, setting up newspapers in Antigua and Barbuda and also in St. Kitts and Nevis. Not to mention, he was a big player in land development in Antigua and Barbuda. His obsession with Antigua and Barbuda was so intense that he became a citizen, and in 2006, the government knighted him as a Knight Commander of the Order of the Nation. From then on, he was Sir Allen, a title he flaunted in his business ventures. He even claimed Prince Edward, Queen Elizabeth II's youngest son, had knighted him. Everything seemed to be going perfectly for Allen. He was living his dream life until 2008 hit and brought a financial crisis that turned his world upside down. In true Ponzi scheme fashion, Stanford's bank was using the money from new depositors to pay off existing ones who were cashing in their certificate of deposits. This setup worked like a charm when the global economy was booming and everyone was eager to invest with Stanford International Bank. But then the 2008 financial crisis struck, and the sales nosedived, and suddenly there was a surge in redemptions. Allen's seemingly perfect plan began to unravel fast. At first, Stanford managed to keep his charade going, but that didn't last too long as his bank's financial documents were full of lies about its capital strength, and the Antiguan authorities brought into his deception. But as the redemption requests piled up, the bank couldn't keep up, and in the end, more than 25,000 clients fell victim to his scam.
But I guess the question for us now and for Stanford then is, what type of business does the ownership of a bankrupt line of health clubs actually go into? Well, the answer turned out to be Caribbean banking.
Now, what's worth noticing is that an investigation by the Office of Inspector General, OIG, revealed that the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, knew as early as 1997 that Allen Stanford was running a Ponzi scheme. Yet they did nothing to stop him. The OIG investigation found that the SEC conducted 4 examinations of Stanford's operation, and each time they discovered that the certificates of deposits couldn't possibly be legitimate and the returns Stanford claimed were highly unlikely given his supposed conservative investment strategy. Despite these red flags, no action was taken against him.
He's an absolute crook. He's a thief and created a blueprint to bilk people out of billions of dollars.
But on February 17, 2009, everything came crashing down for Allen Stanford. Federal enforcement agents raided his offices in Memphis and Houston, and that same day, the SEC announced charges against him. Although the SEC couldn't find him at first, but 2 days later, Stanford was found at his girlfriend's home in Virginia, and it turned out he had unsuccessfully tried to book a charter flight to Antigua and Barbuda, hoping to escape to a place where he couldn't be extradited. But that didn't happen, as he was arrested and extradited back to the USA for further charges. Allen Stanford was ultimately found guilty of orchestrating a massive scheme involving a sale of $7 billion in fake certificates of deposits through his offshore institution, Stanford International Bank, based in Antigua. This international Ponzi scheme earned him comparisons to Bernie Madoff's notorious multi-billion-dollar fraud, and his scam ranks as the second largest in history, only behind Madoff's. Today, around 18,000 of Stanford's clients are still waiting to recover their funds, with the hope that they will someday at least retrieve the money they invested. In 2009, the SEC charged Stanford, and by 2012 he was convicted. Once a billionaire and among the wealthiest individuals in America, Stanford was sentenced to 110 years in prison in 2012, and he faced additional charges from the SEC in the United States. While in prison, Stanford has reportedly been assaulted and continues to maintain his innocence, claiming he was framed. He asserts that the SEC used him as a scapegoat following their poor handoffs of Madoff's case during the 2008 financial crisis, but didn't succeed in that, as he would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. As we wrap up this case, what do you think about the charges Allen Stanford received? Do you believe they were sufficient, or should he have faced even more? If you enjoyed this video and want to watch more fascinating topics like this, click on the video that's popping up on your screen. Until then, take care and goodbye.